The beginning of the chapter, he's 25 years old. He reigns for 29 years. By the end of the chapter, he's dead and gone. And most of the events of his father's reign, the last 20 years that we are told about, are actually in chapter 24. Amaziah is aware of and alive for most of this. And Amaziah's description is found in verses 1 through 4 of chapter 25. And it deals with his age and his ancestry, and it is amazing to me that at the beginning of Amaziah's life, he has Elisha alive, and at the end of Amaziah's life is the ministry of Jonah, the prophet. And so he is bookended with, let me say it this way, big names, big characters of the Bible in his own family's life, and this is a key understanding. In his dad's life, his dad had a priest that was named Jehoiada. He was a good man, and his dad did that which was right as long as Jehoiada was alive. That's found in 2 Chronicles 24 and verse 2. You'll have to forgive me. My throat's a little raw this morning. I'm going to put one of these in. It's really bad etiquette, but we may not make it if we don't. So you have Amaziah's description. And amazingly, within that description of the first 4 verses, it is highlighted that he treats the children of his father's killers. His dad was made a conspiracy against, and his servants slew his dad. And he treats the children of those men who killed his dad well. And it is in stark contrast to how his dad was. His dad had Jehoiada, who he was his priest, and he was not kind to his son, Jehoiada's son. In fact, he had only been done good by Jehoiada, and then when Zechariah comes, he actually kills him. And the key difference in understanding is that Amaziah in this he was bound by the commandment. He did that which was according to the commandment. And it's highlighted at the end of verse 4, when he slew not their children, but did as it is written in the law of Moses, in the law in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded. And so he's as he is doing that which is according to what God said, he's doing right. In fact, verse 2, that was the description. He did that which was right, but not with a perfect heart. And so some things that his dad had done were glaring to him, and he wanted nothing to be a part of it. I don't want to look anything like my dad in this area. Other things he had picked up along the way, some thought processes and the way he operated. His dad threw money at a problem in the last chapter to try to make it go away, and it did. And here he's got a desire, and so he's going to just throw money at the problem. And a lot of people are that way. It's funny, my good friend down in Texas is a bit older. When he was able to adopt, they tried having children for 20 years, and they weren't able to. And so the Lord allowed them finally. After multiple times, it all worked out. And Brother Eric Knight, his daughter, was here with him this year. Gabriella, 4-year-old daughter. A lot of times they'll be out in the store, and they'll ask Eric, "Is that your granddaughter?" And it's like, "Okay, Abraham." They always ask him, "Oh, is this your granddaughter?" But, he's not even 50 or just thereabouts. And, he looks nothing like a grandpa to me. But that's because I'm really close to his age. And so, but it's a blessing. But the reality of the situation is that, I don't know where I was going with Eric. But in Amaziah, in his desire of wanting to advance the kingdom, he was just throwing money at it. And that's where I was going with Eric. Eric said that old parents just throw money at children. When you're a young parent, you don't have any money. And so you can't, you're there, you're tired, whatever. When you're an old parent, you get older in age, you just spend a lot of money. So you're like looking on Amazon, anything that might quiet the kid, you're like, buy 5 of those. Buy these, buy that, get them the best thing, do this, do that, have the nicest thing. Why? Just trying to keep them quiet and do what, there's some crazy inventions since we had kids. And I don't feel like we had kids all that long ago. But my goodness, now it's like insane. Some of y'all parents and new parents, Athena, y'all got advanced technology for your parenting that you have now. It's a blessing. And but the reality of the situation is that God was not for what he wanted to do. And in his desire to advance the kingdom, he had aligned himself with somebody that God was against. And the amazing thing about it is, and this is a key understanding as to where we are in the chapter, is that he never one time asked God's direction. Never one time asked. And you might be one of those who ascribe to the philosophy, well, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And let me just tell you, that is a very dangerous philosophy to have. It's not right in any way. It really is wrong. If you refuse to ask if you're allowed to, it's probably because you know you're not. Let me say that again. If you know not to ask permission because you're going to have to ask forgiveness, you are by virtue admitting guilt that you already knew you weren't supposed to do it. So Amaziah here has spent some money, a large sum of money, not a little sum, 100 talents of silver that he has given to the children of Israel, the Ephraimites, and God has sent a man of God in verse number 7 to him. It says, but there came a man of God to him, saying, O king, let not the army of Israel go with thee, for the Lord's not with thee, to wit, with all the children of Ephraim. But if thou wilt go, do it. Be strong for the battle. God shall make thee fall before the enemy, for God hath power to help and to cast down. So Amaziah here is faced with a dilemma because he's got a desire to advance the kingdom, but within this desire, he's made an alignment with an army that God's not with, and how we acquire something really matters to God. And so then the man of God comes to him here in verses 7 through 9, and Amaziah is faced with a dilemma, and this is where we left off last week. And so the dilemma is simply this. The man of God comes to him and he says, hey, God is against what you are doing. That's verse 7. Verse 8, you can go anyway, but you'll be destroyed. Now, isn't that an amazing, loving, merciful God who knows what the end is for you, warns you of it, but doesn't make you choose the right thing? Now listen, God is not going to force you to do right. You've never one time, what's happening? Why am I doing this? You've never one time done that. There's never been a single time where in the middle of the night, you just found yourself on your knees praying without intention. How did I get here? No, God's not going to force you to read your Bible. He's not going to force you to do what's right. You have to choose to do that. And so he's warned him, and he says, hey, if you want to still go, God's against it. If you want to still go, you can, but just know that God has power to help and to destroy. And then Amaziah's dilemma is this: I've already paid them. I've already given them money. And we looked last Sunday night that within this dilemma, the man of God gives a promise. Look at the very end of verse number 9, because this is where we're going to pick up. The problem is that he's already sent them a bunch of money, 100 talents of silver. And at the very end of verse 9, the man of God answered, the Lord is able to give thee much more than this. We looked last Sunday night that God is able to make up to you what you've lost. He's able to make it up to you. And it's an amazing thing about God that God can give you more than you could ever get yourself. And so it is better to do what he says, even with apparent cost, because there is no true sacrifice in the service of God. He rewards us. Now, it's amazing to me that God puts in us his Holy Spirit so we can even have any hope of doing right. He gives us his word so we can know what we're supposed to do. He then reveals to us his will so we know what we're supposed to do in our life. And then when we do, by his power, what he's told us to do in a way that only he can do it through us anyway, he then rewards us for what we've done. That's a remarkable thing if you think about it, that God's willing to reward us for what he does through us, because we can do nothing of our own selves. And that's an amazing principle. But here, he's told at the end of the verse, the Lord's able to give thee much more than this. Now you need to understand this because we're going to read through the rest of the chapter that this is the promise that he's given when his decision is made. And that is the next part of the chapter. Not only it's Amaziah's description and his desire, and here's his dilemma, but then he makes a decision from verse 10. And Amaziah separated them, to wit, the army that was come to him out of the Ephraim, to go home again. That's a good decision. You understand, the man of God came to him and said, hey, God's not with these people. You better send them home. He's like, but I already paid him a bunch of money. He's like, well, don't worry. God's able to give thee much more than this. So he sent them home. You understand? He's doing that which is right. The amazing thing about Amaziah is he's given the command of God and the counsel of God, and when he has that, he's doing right. Okay, God wants me to do this, I'm going to do that. He's got a desire to do what is right. So he sends them home. In the middle of the verse, it says, wherefore their anger was greatly kindled against Judah, and they returned home in great anger. Amazingly, he did this. It was a contentious decision. I don't know about you, but if I hired a bunch of mercenaries to do a job, it'd be real hard to tell them, just kidding. Why? They're kind of known for killing people. And they're angry. You know what angry killers do? Okay, like it's not exactly just the easiest decision for this man to make, right? But he sends them home anyway. They're very angry at him. It's a contentious decision. Not everybody's on board. But it was the correct decision. He did what was right. Then, in verse number 11, Amaziah strengthened himself, and led forth his people, and went to the valley of Salt, and smote of the children of Seir 10,000. So, not only did Amaziah, in verse 10, separate from the Ephraimites, he did that which was right, but then he strengthened himself against the Edomites. And amazingly, he did win. So he doesn't need what he was trusting in. See, he had relied on the Israelites instead of God. That's why he had bought them, hired them, the 100 talents of silver. And what he found was that God was enough. And so he had strengthened himself in verse 11, and he went out to fight. In verse number 14, it says, now it came to pass after that Amaziah was come from the slaughter of the Edomites. So he won. It was a victory. If you keep reading, verse 11 and 12 says, verse 12 says that he smote of the children of Seir 10,000, and then verse 12, and other 10,000 left alive to the children of Judah, carry away captive, and brought them unto the top of the rock, cast them down from the top of the rock. They were broken in pieces. So now 20,000 he destroyed of his enemy. So it's a victory. We're excited. We're happy. Listen, God told us he's able to give us much more than this. And we've just had a victory. We had a tough decision to make, but we made the right choice. You ever been there? So it's a very difficult decision. Boy, not everybody in my family wants me to make this decision, but I know it's what God wants, and so we're going to do it. Or here it is, these so-called experts of war, they are telling me this is a bad choice, but we make the decision anyway to do what God tells us to do because we're going to follow God. And look, it seems like this is wonderful. But there's a problem. It leads us to verse 13, which is Amaziah's demoralization. Notice what happens in verse 13. But the soldiers of the army, which Amaziah sent back, that they should not go with him to battle, fell upon the cities of Judah. That's where Amaziah is king. From Samaria even unto Beth-horon, and smote 3,000 of them, and took much spoil. So the army of soldiers spoiled him anyway. Let me say it this way. It's not what Amaziah was expecting when the man of God told him, God's able to give you much more than this for him to come home to much less than this. The man of God said, God is able to give thee much more than this. All right, 100,000 talents of silver. Okay, I'm going to trust God. It's wonderful. God's going to give much more than this. We've received good news, a promise from God. How's it going? Horrible. I came home to destruction and debt. They took everything. They spoiled, they killed people. They just ransacked their way. And this is because God told me to do this. You ever felt like, all right, we're going to make a good decision. We're going to do right. We're going to serve the Lord. And seemingly everything go wrong in life? Hey, listen, let me just throw this out there. You're not the first one that's happened to. Let me just have you consider something at this point. I'm trying to hurry through this morning so we actually get through Amaziah's life today. But Joseph was promised good and immediately received evil. Do you remember? Here he has the dream. His brother's bowing down to him. Next thing you know, he's thrown into a pit. Then sold into slavery. Then Potiphar's wife accuses him falsely, and then he's in prison, and then it doesn't go very well, does it? As soon as, watch this now, as soon as something good was promised by God, this is what's going to happen. We get this idea. If this is where I am, and that's where God says that I'm going, then it makes sense for us to go this way to get there. But here's how it often works. This is where we are, and God says that's where you're going, and the next step is right off the cliff. I don't understand. Why did I go this way? Well, because, watch, if 100,000 talents is no big deal to God, what's a little more spoiled? Why do you wait 4 days for Lazarus? 1 day is dead. Do you understand that? I mean, think about this. 1 day is good and dead. Nobody has ever gone to the morgue 2 days in going, maybe there's hope. No, you're plenty dead 1 day in. So why 4 days? Well, if one's easy, why not 4? Well, because now he's decomposing. If he's going to raise you from the dead, you think he's worried about how you smell? Think about it. If the God of heaven is able to raise the dead, do you really think he's concerned? Oh man, now he's starting to rot. I'm not sure if we can do this. Can I remind you, Exodus 37, he's like, can these bones live? Yeah, speak to him. Bones live? What? I'm not. And then here they go. One bone connected to the next bone, and as a kid, you sang songs about it. I'm trying not to sing it right now. And all of a sudden, they come back to a body, and then he's like, wait a minute. All of a sudden, the sinew and the skin began to come back onto him. Here's the amazing part. They're still laying there dead. Imagine, Bro Sam, you come out on a whole bunch of bones on your property there of an elk. That's what we're talking about. And all of a sudden, you're like, Lord, can you make those bones live? And the bones start connecting back together. And all the meat and all the muscle and all of it. And then the skin comes back and the fur and all of it. And it's laying there. Right? An elk. And Brother Sam goes, I guess God just couldn't do it. Because it's still dead. You'd be like, that's crazy. Look what he's doing, right? Wouldn't you? If he made the bones all back to bodies, that's kind of miraculous in and of itself, is it not? But listen, the God of heaven that is able to take bones and turn them into bodies is just as able to breathe life into them. But we look at it and go, well, I guess it didn't happen. What do you mean? Well, they didn't get up and walk right away. So he's like, command the wind to blow. Oh, there's more to it. And he commands the wind to blow, and they breathe life, and then they get up and they start walking around. That whole army does. Amazingly, God never tells us what the end of those people is. Don't ask the question, and I don't know the answer. It's one of mine. But here's what we do, because this is what happens with Amaziah, is when he had an expectation of what God was going to do. Okay, God said he's able to give me much more than this. But then those soldiers spoiled him anyway. And he felt like, man, this isn't going how I thought it was going to go. This isn't working out like I anticipated. A lot of people get saved or get right with God and immediately go through all kinds of warfare, all kinds of trouble. And they're like, man, this isn't what I was expecting. How many of you have ever heard something along those lines before? You ever experienced that? You try living for God, start doing right, and boy, it's like all hell breaks loose in your life, coming after you, trying to get you back. You're like, I don't understand it, God. If I was trying to do what's right, and that's where I thought you were taking me, why then is it we went that way? What he signed up for, get this, okay, I'll sign up for 100,000 talents of silver. But he didn't expect him to cost him more. Now it's they spoiled us. They did all this too. All this other. I'm not sure I can handle this. You ever felt pushed to your brink as to whether or not you could trust God with all of it? I mean, sure, maybe one thing, but then it was one thing and another thing and another thing and another thing all at once. And you're like, I'm not sure I can handle all this, God. Let me ask you, what was the promise that was made to him? Remember what it was? The last part of verse 9. Look at it again. Tell me what the promise is. That God was able to give what? Much more than this. Now, see, here's the problem that Amaziah faces. Because Amaziah begins to be disillusioned with God and he's dejected about what God is doing, it starts Amaziah's downfall. Look at verse 14. That's where we are. Now it came to pass after that Amaziah was come from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought the gods of the children of Seir and set them up to be his gods, and bowed down himself before them and burned incense unto them. You see, here he rejects God. Now, why would he reject God when he's doing right? And the man of God just made him a promise of prosperity and doing with God, and how God was able to restore and give him back what he's lost. And you understand that these false gods haven't offered him that promise? Please listen. These false gods just got beat. They haven't promised him, hey, if you make us your gods, we'll go ahead and give you all that money you lost out to the Israelites. That's not there. That's not included in the bargain. So why on earth would you come home from battle where you've given a victory and then immediately go and reject the God who you decided to separate yourself unto? You separated from the Israelites and you strengthen yourself for battle and you're trying to advance his kingdom. Why would you then turn to the false gods? I'll tell you why. Because he feels like God left him. And he can justify it in his own heart. Well, God did me wrong, and I wasn't treated right. Hey, I wasn't expecting to come back to slaughter and come back to being spoiled, and all that these Israelites did, they did that because I followed God. And I wasn't expecting it to be this hard and to cost this much and to hurt like this. I wasn't anticipating this. And so he rejects God. Fine then. If this is how it is to serve God, I don't want to serve God. Man, if living for God means my whole family's going to make a mockery of me, I'm just not going to do it. I thought at least somebody would be happy for me. It seems like my work makes fun of me. My family makes fun of me. Everybody just thinks I'm a fool for trying to serve God and love God and do right. And It doesn't even feel like I have any support, so I'm just going to forget it. And so he rejects the Lord. Not only does he reject God, but notice God's graciousness in the next verse. Verse 15 says, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Amaziah. And watch, and he sent unto him a prophet. Isn't it amazing how every time Amaziah needs to hear from God, he sends a man to him to hear from him? So he sends him a prophet, which said unto him, why hast thou sought after the gods of the people, which could not deliver their own people out of thine hand? Not only did he reject God, but reason is gone. Please listen. So many people, when they feel hurt, when they feel offended at God or God's people, when they reject God, throw reason right out the window. Here's what will happen. You ready? Your family that was making fun of you for serving God, you will then go do whatever they want you to do so they can be happy with you. You mean the people that are mocking you? Well, I'm just going to try to win this person who, I want the affection of that, whether you're a boy and it's the affection of that girl, or whether you're a girl and it's the affection of that boy. And by the way, that's the only way it's supposed to be, those two options. But whether you're seeking after that affection, and so you go, well, I'm just going to serve. I'm just going to go after them because I want a good spouse. You mean you want a godly spouse by rejecting God and going for somebody in the world? That's really going to get you the spouse you think you want? But all reason is gone when you've rejected God. I want this good, godly home with peace and love and joy. And so I'm going to do that by rejecting God and not having God involved and not going to church and not having anything, not following after righteousness, which is how we get the peace and the love and the joy and the like we reject. All reason is abandoned. He won't even listen. So the man of God comes to him and he's like, what are you doing? These gods couldn't even deliver their people out of your hand. Why are you turning to them? Here's what happened. He came home victorious, a loser. Came back from battle, having won the fight, but he brought something home with him. He rejected God. Reason's gone. And then notice the next verse. Here's that man of God told him, what are you doing? And notice what he says. It came to pass as he talked with him. So the man of God is literally saying, why hast thou sought after the gods of the people which could not deliver their own people out of thine hand? And he's going to continue. But as he spoke to him, the king said unto him, art thou made of the king's counsel? Forbear. You know what he just told him? This is real. In the Hebrew, here's what this means. Shut up. I'm in charge. That's what he told him. And notice what happened. He says, why shouldst thou be smitten? Hey, if you don't stop, I'm going to kill you. I don't want to have to kill you. Oh, sure. You realize you're the one that gets to choose that, right? And then notice, then the prophet forbear. So he just asked him, why hast thou sought after the gods of the people which could not deliver their own people out of thine hand? And he said, art thou made of the king's counsel? Forbear. Why should I be smitten? He said, and he finishes the verse with this statement. I know that God hath determined to destroy thee because thou hast done this and hast not hearkened unto my counsel. So not only has he rejected God and reason is gone, but here he's rejected godly counsel. Lord sent him a man, sent him a warning, but he wouldn't listen. He's trying to reason with him, trying to get him to see the error of his ways, but he wouldn't listen. Why? Because he's mad at God. He's embittered against the Lord. No, this didn't go like I thought it should. You ever been in a situation, I'm talking about, look, not out in the world, but I mean in a church setting or maybe with church people, and it didn't go the way you thought it would? You never expected to get hurt that bad from somebody who called themselves a brother or sister? You didn't think that a church could act that way? You didn't know that that could happen by somebody claiming the name of God, right? You understand what I'm saying? Why? Because what you had expectation of, and then it just went a whole different way. What was the promise the man of God made to him? Come on, verse 9. God is able to give thee much more than this, right? We're not done with the story, but do you think Amaziah ever got that? The message is simple this morning when we finally get there. If you don't make it till then, you won't get the much more than this. But notice, he asks, verse 17. So he asks the man, verse 16. He said unto the prophet, Art thou made of the king's counsel? You know what he's asking him? Who are you to tell me what to do? Why should I listen to you? Why do you think I should listen to you? Do you understand that all the good decisions that this man's ever made were because of the word of God, God's commandments, and God's counsel? And here comes God trying to bless him again with his word. Listen now, bless him with a warning of his word. And he refuses to hearken. So I don't have to listen to you. But notice chapter 17. Look, or verse 17. Notice what it starts off with. Then Amaziah, king of Judah, what's the next two words? Took advice. That was not from the prophet. Isn't it amazing? There's always somebody that wants to give you the right answer. Look, you call up somebody, one of your friends, because you're mad at your husband. Oh, he's just an idiot. You should leave him. You deserve to be happy. Hey, that's bad advice. Listen to me. That's bad advice. Oh, well, you deserve happiness. Why don't you shut up? Stop listening to that advice. That's bad advice. You made a covenant together before God. Seek godly counsel. What does God say? Not, well, how do you feel about it? Because the only time Amaziah has done that which is right has been according to the commandment of God, and when he did what God counseled him to do. Do you understand the key to Amaziah's doing right was the word of God? Some decisions he doesn't even ask, nearly gets himself in trouble. Now he refuses the warning, gets himself in trouble. And his downfall was he rejected God, and reason was gone. Now he's refusing godly counsel, and then he's relying on others instead. I'm going to take advice. What should I do? Well, what's his desire? Advance the kingdom, right? Who was it that spoiled him? The children of Israel, wasn't it? Those people he hired. So notice what his advice is. Notice what he's going to do. Verse 17, then Amaziah, king of Judah, took advice and sent to Joash. He's the son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let us see one another in the face. You know what he wants to do? Here's what he's telling him. I want to fight you, big boy. That's what he's telling him. Hey, you come down here. Let's meet up. We're going to go to war. Let's meet each other face to face. Let's go. I'm coming for you. Why? Because you took what's mine. I want my toy back. Please get this. God's made him a promise. What was the promise? God's able to give you much more than this. Amaziah's like, I just want back what I lost. I want my old life back. I want my old way back. I want to just get back to where I was. This whole thing about God just isn't working out. I'm just going to go back. Here's the problem. You can't go back. You've rejected God. Your reason's gone. You're starting to rely on other people. You're refusing godly counsel. There's nowhere to turn. So he's going to rely on other people's advice instead. You should just do this. Yeah, we're going to get it back. Just go back. Just go take it. Just go take it from them. They're probably scared of you anyway after seeing that big battle. How wonderful you are. Isn't it amazing? Listen, if you go to the friend who talks about how great you are and how all the problem is someone else's, that's not the person you should go to in the middle of a problem. If you need counsel, don't get it from them. Why? They're a bad friend. You should get the counsel from the friend who's like, what are you doing? You're an idiot. Get right with God. Doesn't God say, hey, what does God think about this? What are you doing? Well, the reason why you wouldn't go to that friend is because you already rejected that counsel in verse 16. So he took advice. We're going to go to war with Israel. We're going to fight Israel. Let's go get our money back. Let's go get back what we lost. Man, want to get it back. Here's the problem. Look at verse 19. So Joash, this wicked king, gives him this admonition. He says, thou sayest, lo, thou hast smitten the Edomites, and thine heart lifteth thee up to boast. Abide now at home. Why shouldest thou meddle to thine hurt that thou shouldst fall, even thou and Judah with thee? But Amaziah would not hear, for it came of God, that he might deliver them into the hand of their enemies, because they sought after the gods of Edom. Please get this. Here's the problem with this philosophy. I'm going to get back to my old, I'm going to do this. You are now fighting against God. You rejected God in verse 14. You went after the gods of the children of the Edomites. You rejected him because what you thought he was going to do and how he decided he was going to do it, or when he decided to do it, wasn't in your schedule. It was on his. And now all of a sudden you're mad. And so you're going to go against God. Well, I'm going to show him. I'm going to serve these other gods. I'm going to do it my own way. I'm going to get my life back. There's only one problem. You're now trying to fight against God. Please understand this. That is a losing endeavor every single time. You cannot fight against God and win. You can't do it. Remember what the man of God said in verse 16? The prophet forbare and said, I know that God hath determined to destroy thee, because thou hast done this and hast not hearkened unto my counsel. You know what he said? Oh, God must want you gone. That should have been enough to scare you, wouldn't you think? No, he doubled down on it. And here this wicked king, the king of Israel, is like, why are you lifted up in pride? What, you had one little victory? By the way, God gave you that, and you think that somehow you can fight without him, against him? Good luck. He's warning him, this isn't going to go well for you. But reason is gone. He's not thinking straight. Can I tell you, when you're bitter, you're not thinking straight? When you're angry, you're not thinking straight? Have you ever made a dumb decision in anger? Come on, be honest. So why, being angry at God, do you think you have clarity to make good decisions? Why, in your bitterness or your rebellion or whatever it is, why do you think, I know what I'm doing? He doesn't just lose the fight. Because anytime you fight against God, you're going to lose. He doesn't just lose the fight. And it's amazing how God did this, because it wasn't my plan. I've been wanting to get to the end of Psalm 81 for months. But you know what else he missed out on? He missed out on the blessing. What was the promise? God is able to give thee much more than this. But notice what happens. Verse 22. Judah was put to the worst before Israel, and they fled every man to his tent. And Joash, the king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Jehoahaz of Beth-Shemesh, brought him to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. Time out, stop, look up here real quick. Do you remember who God was against? He said, the Lord is not with Israel, to wit, the children of Ephraim. You know what the king of Israel did? Took him to Jerusalem, to the city, went to the gate of Ephraim, and from there destroyed the gate. You think that's coincidental? No. He's making it personal. You understand what he's doing? He's taking the king of Judah's face and rubbing his nose in it. You thought you could beat me. You thought you had a better army than we did, that somehow you didn't need our help. We're going to rub it right in your face. It doesn't stop there. It's not just the wall. His defenses are gone. Notice verse 24, he took all the gold and the silver and all the vessels that were found in the house of God with Obed-Edom and the treasures of the king's house, the hostages also, and returned to Samaria. Here was the promise. God's not with Ephraim. 100 talents of silver. God's able to give thee much more than this. But because Amaziah did not stay with God, he rejected God and walked away from him. Not only did he not receive 100,000 talents of silver, but he actually lost everything. Lost it all. Why? Because he didn't remain faithful. Now, not only here is Amaziah's destruction from verse 19 through 25. I'm trying to hurry. Let me just say it this way. I'm going to make a statement and we're going to close. If God is the only one who can make it up to you, you understand what you've destroyed in your life, what you've lost already, maybe what decisions you've already made, the worm, the cankerworm, all that we looked at. If God's the only one that can make it up to you, why would you abandon him if you want any hope of seeing it in the end? All right, if we don't wait on God's timing, we'll miss out on the promised blessings. Many people have quit right before the promise was going to come due. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, and he will exalt you. When? In due time. Problem is, oftentimes we feel due quicker than he does. But if we don't wait on the time, the exaltation doesn't come. So you know what Satan was trying to do with Jesus, who had humbled himself, became obedient, right? All that Jesus had lowered himself. Philippians 2, do you know what Satan was trying to do in Matthew 4 with the temptation? Do you see all these kingdoms? I'll give it to you. I'll give you all this power. I'll give you all this authority. I'll give you what will rightfully come to you. Jesus said in Matthew 28, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth and under the earth. That's due to him. The devil's like, I'll just give it to you early. Doesn't that sound good? You can skip the cross. Here's the problem. All he had to offer him was the earth. But look it up. It's what happened. He offered him the kingdoms of this earth. They were his to give. But that's not all Jesus' kingdom was supposed to be. Heaven, earth, and under the earth. He's got it all. He'd have missed out on the blessing if he had tried to take the shortcut. The devil's trying to get him to get what is his before it's his. And he said, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. Why? I'm trusting him, the righteous judge. So not only Amaziah's demoralization in verse 13, his downfall in verse 14 through 17, then we see his destruction further down in the chapter. And then lastly in the chapter, look at verse 26 through 28, and I want you to see his death. I want you to see his death. Now, the rest of the acts of Amaziah, first and last, behold, are they not written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel? Now, after that, the time that Amaziah did turn away from following the Lord, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem. And he fled to Lachish, but they sent to Lachish after him and slew him there. And they brought him upon horses and buried him with his fathers in the city of Judah. Remember that the chapter starts with Amaziah not wanting to do things the same way as his dad. The chapter ends with Amaziah's death exactly like his dad. They made a conspiracy against him and slew him. I don't mean anything like my dad. Winds up just like him. I don't want to be anything like my drunk parents. Well, you better go with God. Why? Because otherwise, just the statistics say you're going to wind up just like him. Say, but it didn't go how I thought it was gonna. I thought it was gonna be all roses and nice and easy and great. But as soon as I got a promise of some good thing, I immediately received bad, and that wasn't good. So I just don't even want. Wait on the Lord. Wait. Why? Because it's not time yet. In verse 20, he lost his protection. Here's what he lost. He lost his protection. God delivered him into his hand. Well, you thought you were protected because you're smart? You ever nearly had an accident you didn't even know you were about to get in? Come on, be honest. Like you realized right after you didn't get in the accident that you were going, like you were, oh, I didn't even see them coming. I'm glad they missed me because I didn't do anything about it. A while back, not the other day, because that's my famous saying. It's been like a year ago now. So the other day, I was driving down the road. It's dark. I'm in the church van. The church van's lights are less than stellar. They're, from 97 or whatever the church van is. And I'm used to the LED lights now, which are a night and day difference between those things. Anyway, I'm driving down the van. I'm driving on a dirt road. And a deer jumped out in front of me. And I missed it. And then I slammed on my brakes. Because it was that fast. It jumped out. I went, but by the time I had hit my brakes, I was supposed to have hit it, Brother Joe. You know what I mean? Like I was braced. I'm like, and I didn't. And I didn't miss the deer because I had excellent reflexes. Or somehow my driving capability was so grand that I could. No. I did not miss the deer because of me. God kept me from the accident. And that's just one of. How many more do we not know? But by rejecting God, he lost his protection. In verse 24, he lost his provision. They took all the gold and silver, all the vessels, and the treasures of the king's house. You thought 100,000 talents of silver was bad. They came in, took everything you own. Lost it all. He lost his power. He's on the run. He's no longer the king. He lost his prominence. He lifted himself up in pride. He thinks he's somebody. He's immediately put back in his place. He lost his very life. Verse 27 says that they followed him all the way to Lachish to kill him. He lost his very person. Why? Because he rejected God. And here was the promise that was made to him by God. God is able to give thee much more than this. But you know what he wound up with? Losing everything. And the reason he did was because from here to there, he just didn't stay with God. Here's the thing this morning. I'm not saying you're not going to have a nosedive off a cliff after a promise from God. I'm saying you very well might. It's happened before. When God wanted to bless Job, you know what he did? He started talking to the devil about him. You considered my servant Job? Job 1 and 2 doesn't go very well for Job. Would you agree? Job 42 went really well for Job. Would you agree? Well, how did Job get 42? Because he made it through 41 chapters. And by the time 42 rolled around, Job was still with God. But had Job quit in chapter 3 or even chapter 1 like we would have, maybe you're super spiritual and you'll make it into the chapter 2 stuff, but you call it I'm done. I can't handle it. It's too much. What about chapters 10, 14, 17? I'm talking about when, all right, this is how life's going to be now. But by chapter 42, Job was, I'm just with him. And he receives the blessing. And at some point in the future, Job wrote it down with some insight as to what was happening. So we even got answers. We're not even promised that. Sometimes what we have to do is live to tell about it. Just stay with God. Make it through. Don't get hardened by hard things. Don't get bitter. Don't give up. Don't quit. Imagine you're a 12-year-old girl, gives your life to God, decides, I'm going to serve God. I want a godly husband. So you're 18 years old and that hasn't happened yet. So you feel like God's abandoned you. You're left for dead. You're an old maid now because you're 18. So that's it. I'm going to find a husband at a bar then. I'm going to show you how to get a godly husband. How's that going to go, you think? Sure, you can find a man that'll take everything from you. But do you really think you're going to find what you were hoping for? 12 and 13 and 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and the promise that God had. Do you really think you're going to find that by rejecting God and refusing reason and running from Him? Or just stay with Him and see what He has to offer. See what He brings in. Thought it was hilarious. Miss Patty Fisher, the ladies' thing, said, God will bring you a good husband. And she said, have you seen the guys here? Boy, have we heard it. You know what happened? God brought a man in the back door of the church. You mean God's able to bring a man? Oh yeah, He can give you much more than this. You look around and say, well, there's not much here. He can give you much more than this. You better stay with Him. Because don't think you're going to reject Him and then still get the 100,000 talents or whatever you think's coming to you. Because that's not how it works. You want the blessing of serving God? You're going to have to stay serving God. The promise was made in verse 9. God's able to give you much more than this. You understand God wanted to give him much more than this? But he rejected him because it didn't go the way he thought. And if you don't wait on God's timing, you'll miss out on the blessing He has for you too. Stand to our feet this morning. Amaziah's life